Hello everyone, my name is Mike. Happy October. This is the Bored Cyborg. The hell was that? Welcome back to yet another episode. Today I'm doing something that I've yet to do on the channel. I am going to be talking about John Carpenter's horror films. All of his horror films that he's done throughout his career, and I'm going to rank them from the worst to the best. Now, worst is a strong word because I don't think he has any films that I hate, or I know he doesn't have any films that I hate. There are a couple that, we'll get into it. I'd love to know what your John Carpenter horror ranking list looks like, so feel free to leave that in the comments below, and we could get a little discussion rolling. So Carpenter has 11 horror films that I'm going to be counting down from 11 to 1, 1 being my favorite. Let's get right into it. Alright, my number 11 is The Ward. I sadly do not own The Ward. I think it is his weakest film by far, actually. It's the one that feels most phoned in. It doesn't have anything really to it that makes it feel distinct as a Carpenter horror film. It feels like a film that was written and conceived by somebody isolated from Carpenter. Carpenter read the script, liked it, and wanted to do it. And it feels like the studio had some sort of weird control over it. I don't know. Now, here's the thing about The Ward. It's really not a bad horror film. I don't think it's bad at all. In fact, I like it. I like the insane asylum setting. I love the twist. I love Amber Heard. She's great in it. It's got a lot going for it. It's got a good atmosphere, good characters. But it doesn't feel like a Carpenter film. And that's why it's my number 11. That is The Ward. I do want it for the collection. I'd love to have it on Blu-ray or DVD, whatever. But I don't currently, and it is my number 11 John Carpenter horror film. Number 10 is is probably a controversial one. That is Christine. I'm not a huge fan of this movie. Now, granted, I haven't seen it in a few years. I do want to rewatch it soon. I'm sure I'll like it a little bit more, but I'm confident with where it's at on the list. I don't think it's going to supersede any of the ones that are to come before it here. Christine, everybody knows it, based on a Stephen King novel. Stephen King, Carpenter, you'd think it'd be a match made in heaven for me. But this one just falls short. The relationship between the kid and the car is interesting. The characterization that the car has as a character of its own works very well. It's shot very well. It feels like an anthropomorphized car, like it should. But there's just something about the flow of the film, the pacing of the film. I also feel like it doesn't quite feel like a Carpenter horror film. Again, it's the only other one that I could say that it just feels a little bit removed from his vision. I don't know why. I can't put my finger on it. I like the movie. I don't love the movie. That is why it's my number 10, Christine. Next up is another film that I have somewhere in a box and I can't frickin' find it. That is Village of the Damned. I do own it, like I said, somewhere. I know it's on Scream Factory. I like Village of the Damned. Again, I like the movie. I think it's on par with the original. I think the original's pretty slow. The remake, Carpenter's remake, is definitely paced a little bit better. It's got Christopher Reeve, who always gives good performances. It's got creepy kids. It's got a very interesting aesthetic to it. It feels like a Carpenter film. So this is the lowest one on my list that actually feels like a Carpenter film to me. You know he's a fan of the original. You know he wanted to do his own spin on it. And it works. It does some things differently. It expands upon the lore and the mythology of the original. And I like it. I just don't love it. That's why it's my number 9, Village of the Damned. Alright, my number 8 is a film with James Woods, who is so goddamn good in this movie. Vampires. He plays a vampire hunter who is commissioned by the Vatican to hunt down vampires. His name is Jack Crow, and he's part of Team Crow. In fact, he's the leader of Team Crow, which is a mercenary type of small band of vampire hunters who go from town to town and eliminate the vampires, again, per instructions from the Vatican. And that's really what Vampires is all about. It all rests on a pretty cool script that kind of deconstructs vampires in a way, but also adds the Carpenter touch to the Carpenter's perspective on the vampire genre. And it's definitely cool. It oozes with a lot of just cool scenes, very They Live in a sense. But James Woods' character is the epitome of cool, and his dialogue is so off the cuff, so funny. In fact, I read that he was pretty difficult on set, and a lot of his lines were actually improvised. He does such a great job. He's the glue that holds this one together. If it wasn't for James Woods, this film would probably be down a notch, or at least a point or two. And I love it. Well, I don't love it. I like it quite a bit. That's why it's my number 8, Vampires. Alright, pretty much every other film that is on this list that I'm going to talk about, I love. And yes, I even love Ghosts of Mars, which is my number 7. To me, this is Escape from Mars. This is the film that Carpenter wanted to do with Kurt Russell, Escape from Mars. It didn't happen. Instead, he got Ice Cube, who does a good job, Jason Statham, what's her name from Species, Natasha Hendrich. This is just the epitome of a fun Carpenter movie. And I bet you if this film came out 10 to 15 years before it did, people would love this movie. As it stands, as an early 2000s film, people don't like this movie, and I get why, but at the same time, I have a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that people don't have fun with this movie. This is such a fun, frenetic, well-paced action horror movie. And that's another reason why I love it, because it's action and horror. It takes place on Mars. Humans have been colonizing Mars for some time now. Things are starting to get a little weird, and a team of soldiers is sent to find out exactly what's going on. On Mars is a prisoner in Ice Cube, who they basically let free once shit starts hitting the fan with these weird, ghost-like, zombie, vampire, cavemen creatures. That's the best way I can describe it. They're a very unique creature, and they have a very unique look, and they don't f*** around. They're very primitive, primal sorts of beings, and it is just so much fun. I love this movie. I love the set design. I love the miniature work, the matte paintings. This is, in my opinion, the last great Carpenter movie, and everyone hated it, and it drives me crazy because it's really a fun movie. Yeah, it's not that well written, but it's shot well, and it just is fun. It's got fun dialogue, fun characters. Ghosts of Mars is my number 7, and I ain't ashamed to say it. Every single film left is a heavy fucking hitter, in my opinion. This is 1980. This is Carpenter's The Fog. This is the film he released after Halloween. Talk about horror films with atmosphere. I love atmosphere in horror films. A horror film could be absolute shit. It could have little to no dialogue that makes any fucking sense. As long as it has atmosphere and camera work and otherworldly sort of imagery, I'm in. The Fog is quintessential in terms of atmospheric horror films. Obviously, the fog plays a big part in this. How they achieve the light shining through the fog to illuminate it, the slow-moving amorphous clouds all over the town, in front of the doors, outside of the homes, moving just like a unit, like an amorphous cloud over the town. And in this fog are creatures, are ghosts, are corporeal ghosts, really, who eviscerate people with various sorts of weapons, and they all move within this cloud of fog. And it's just an old school ghost story. In fact, it starts out with an old man around a campfire with a bunch of kids telling the story that is basically laying out the mythology of the story that we're about to see, and the history of it, and how it all started, why it's happening. All of it's right there in the beginning, but it doesn't take away from the story and how it unfolds. Jamie Lee Curtis, Tom Atkins is excellent as usual. I fucking love Tom Atkins in anything he does. Season of the Witch. Oh my god, I'm blanking. Night of the Creeps. Tom Atkins is great as usual. The relationship between him and Jamie Lee Curtis is a little odd at points, I'm not gonna lie. A little creepy odd at points, but I love it. Adrienne Barbeau is in this as the smooth-talking disc jockey, radio announcer who has her own sort of radio show. She broadcasts it from a lighthouse, which is sort of isolated from the rest of humanity, and it's just, God, I could talk about this movie. I love this movie. It's my number 6, The Fog. My number 5 is a film that I'm sure none of you have ever heard of. That is Halloween from 1978. I love Halloween. Is it my favorite Halloween movie? No, it's not. Halloween 3 is. But I love Halloween. Of course I love Halloween. It's a damn near perfect film in my view. It's a 4.5 out of 5. Most people would say it's perfect. I just can't quite give it the perfect score. that it may deserve, but everything about it, the atmosphere, the killer, the music, the acting, the performances, the cinematography, the edit, everything about this film is a masterclass in how to make a slasher film, so much so that almost everything after it owes something to it. Even films like Scream, even films that are deconstructing the genre, owe something to John Carpenter's Halloween. Was this the first slasher? No. It wasn't even the first American slasher. I'd say Black Christmas, and maybe even a couple films before that hold that title. Giallo was doing its thing in the 60s, so Blood and Black Lace predates this by almost 18 years. It wasn't the first slasher, but it was the first of its kind to immortalize a character that walks the balance beam between monster and man, and the enigmatic figure that the Shape is in this. It's all so well done. It's all so creepy to this day. The music, the sound cues, iconic. It is the epitome of the word iconic horror. The words iconic horror. And I love Halloween. It is my number 5. Next up, my number 4 is In the Mouth of Madness. I love this movie. This is the perfect amalgam of Stephen King and H.P. Lovecraft lore kind of mixed into one movie. Of course, it's totally 100% Carpenter as well. Follows Sam Neill's character, who's like a special investigator who's sent out to find this elusive author of a very popular horror series. And in the process, he delves deeper and deeper into madness, questioning his own sanity, the line between reality and this fictional sort of world that he finds himself in begins to blur. There are so many great scenes, like the old lady that owns the hotel and her dark secrets. The practical effects in this are absolutely incredible and Lovecraftian to the core, and still haunt me to this day. Sam Neill's descent into madness is perfect. Nobody could have done it like he did, and I absolutely love his arc. I absolutely love this movie. It is one of my favorite horror films from the 90s, and one of my favorite horror films of all time, really. Obviously one of Carpenter's best, too. So, that is In the Mouth of Madness. If you haven't seen this, watch it this October. In the Mouth of Madness is amazing. And it's also part, by the way, of his trilogy of post-apocalyptic sort of films. Hell yeah. My numero 3 is They Live. They Live is an action, sci-fi, horror film. Some may argue that it's not, but I argue that it is. And damn it, it's my list. So, They Live is about a man, played by Roddy Piper, in a perfect role for him, who comes across a pair of glasses. And this pair of glasses allows him to see the world as it really is. The world, apparently, in this universe is controlled by extraterrestrials, who look a lot like skeleton zombie things. And so when he puts on these glasses, he sees the world for what it truly is. He sees all the advertisement, and instead of an advertisement with a beautiful woman and a beer or whatever, it says obey. And the TV's feeding us propaganda. Everywhere he looks, he sees through people. And with these glasses, he can also see who are the extraterrestrials that are amongst us, sort of keeping us in line, watching us, studying us. He's able to differentiate them from the actual real humans with these glasses. Naturally, nobody believes him until he has a 10-minute fist fight with Keith David's character, which finally forces Roddy Piper to put the glasses on him. Keith David now sees that what Roddy was saying was true, even though he thought he was insane. So the two of them load up, they stock up on ammo, and they figure out a way to take these alien scum out, and they do just that. And it is glorious. Buck Flowers in this as a bum, of course, who has a really cool transition into one of the ones who's, you might as well play for the winning team. He's the one who sort of sold his soul to the devil, in this case, the alien civilization that is controlling humanity. They Live is iconic. It's one of Carpenter's best. It is my number 3 John Carpenter horror film. They Live. My number 2 is an interesting one. It's one that I watched. The first time I watched it, I liked it. Second time, I liked it a little bit more. Third time, I loved it. Fourth time, it became one of my favorite horror films of all time. That is Prince of Darkness. This one really, really creeps up on you, man. And the more you watch it, the more you learn how many big ideas are in this film. I mean, we're talking Satan, God, Satan's father, a primordial ooze that contains the essence of Satan, Time travel. A civilization from the future trying to warn the past about what they're doing is for naught. So many huge ideas and it all takes place in one building, an abandoned church, I believe. It all takes place in one building, but it feels so big in scope because of the levity, or I'm sorry, the weight of the ideas that Carpenter employs here. Carpenter directed this. He did the music with Alan Howarth, and it is such a great movie with so many little twists and turns, so many layers to the insanity that is this movie. Donald Pleasance is in this as a priest who's questioning his faith. Shit, this movie has Alice Cooper as a vagrant who is being plagued by the satanic possession, demonic sort of forces that are going on. And again, things get progressively weirder for this crew of students who are sent in to investigate this. They all have different jobs, and they all have really good chemistry together, especially the guy with the porn stash there on the... He's alright. He's one of the weaker elements of the film, to be honest. But man, the essence of this movie, there's an exposition scene that really, last time I watched it, made the film click for me, and I love it. Prince of Darkness, one of the best. It's my number 2 John Carpenter horror film. And of course, my number 1 John Carpenter horror film of all time just happens to be my number 1 horror film of all time. That is this beautiful version, too, of The Thing. The Thing is the motherfucking thing, baby. The Thing is the finest horror film ever made, the finest thriller ever made, the finest suspense film ever made, and it all takes place in an Arctic base who's sent out to do some, digging, normal scientist stuff. They uncover this alien being, this alien craft, I should say, and this being that shape-shifts to make itself look identical, act identically to its human host, or any host, presumably. What makes this film so damn special is it focuses on a group of men who think that they're the shit. They think they're tough, they're tough as nails, especially MacReady, who is, by the way, a badass. Kurt Russell, of course. And all of them learn how small they are in the presence of this shape-shifting alien being who can wipe them out, is wiping them out with ease. But it takes Kurt Russell and Keith David, the smarts of those two, the wit of those two, the cleverness of those two, to ultimately get the upper hand, maybe, on this alien being. This film is iconic. The sequences, are iconic. The set pieces, like the one where MacReady's testing everybody's blood, the tension in that scene is... I've seen this film 25 times, and it still clenches my butthole every single time I watch it. I can go on and on and on and on and on about this movie. I've talked about it in the past. I will talk about it in the future. It is my favorite horror film of all time, my second favorite film of all time. Some days it's my favorite film of all time, period. This is such a perfect thriller horror film with the greatest practical effects that have ever been filmed on screen, the greatest chemistry between a large group of characters ever. All of them are distinct, all of them are memorable. The Thing from 1982 is the best horror movie ever made, god damn it. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it right now. I just want to thank you guys for checking out my ranking of John Carpenter's horror films, all 11 of them that he's done up to this point. I ranked them all. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Of course, my favorite of all time is The Thing, but I'm dying to know what your list looks like, so feel free to leave that in the comments below. I know everybody's list is going to be a little bit different, because there are so many movies to his horror catalog, so please leave it in the comments. Let's get a little discussion going. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, as well as the little bell for notifications. Anyway, guys, I will see you next time. Bored Cyborg out.